of the Blue White Breakdown. I'm Max Ralph. That's Johnny McGonigal here. It's been a bit of a whirlwind past couple of weeks for myself. Haven't been on the official Blue White Breakdown in a while. I've been doing some small little solo videos while on the road, of course. But Johnny, it's good to see you again. It has been a little while. How are things? We feeling good here as we get into the third month of 2025 already?
Max, I'm feeling great. The weather is turning. I know that Bob went, on our podcast earlier this week. He was worried about it getting cold again and, it being a fleeting feeling, this great weather we're having. It's nice out. I got
Mhm.
my Callaway quarter zip on, the golf hat. Like I'm ready to go. I am ready to go.
No, I'm the same way.
And hey, maybe it'll be really nice for blue white. It should be. I mean, I hope so. I hope so. Fingers crossed. Then
Yeah,
maybe I come up to State College Thursday night and we go out and play a round of golf on Friday potentially.
that would be
Um, you know,
elite.
yeah. After of course we cover remotely the NFL draft Thursday night when Abdul Carter goes number one overall and Tyler Warren ends up in the top 15.
Mhm.
And then we got to get back on it Friday night, for when KJ Winston and maybe even Jalen Reed
Yeah.
go on day two in the second and third rounds. But very interested to see how that all pans out. And we'll be talking NFL draft during this live show, fielding questions from everyone in the chat, but also talking a lot about spring practice here, Max, as we talk about the weather turning. Spring practice starts up for Penn State in a few weeks. We've got winter workouts going on. I know you're in State College. You'll be at the Lash Building later today to talk to Chuck Losey and see some of these guys work out. Not an official max out day, which is disappointing for you, Max. I'm sure that your day is taken away from you, but uh, nonetheless, an opportunity to see these guys work out, talk to the Penn State strength and conditioning coach, and get some good deets and info on who's standing out so far.
Yeah, Johnny, I'm glad you brought it up. We're gonna hit the draft stuff. We're gonna get to the comments. If we've got a live audience in here with us, hit us in the chat. We are happy and looking to answer anything and everything you've got. It doesn't even have to be Penn State related. We're certified for some small talk. So hit us with it. But yeah, Johnny, you're right. We're gonna talk to Chuck Losey today, the strength coach who is always good for an update on the young guys, which is obviously something that a lot of people, I feel like, Penn State fans can never get enough of the young guys on the team. They always want to hear more about where people are at. I think there are a handful of names, from freshmen and second year players that you and I are really curious to see who Chuck talks about today. I think there are some serious standouts that are going to impact this team in the fall. I mean, all we've talked about is how much the roster retention has been impressive and everything. And this is going to be a veteran group, especially on, the offensive side of the ball at the skill positions. But I really think that there are a lot of young names who are going to be important this year that, we don't want to overlook. So Johnny, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. If you had to pick, two or three names that you think Chuck Losey could highlight today that are going to be weight room beasts that end up being out there on the field in a significant capacity this fall, who you got?
Max, I've got two guys, and neither of them are going to really be a surprise to you, and probably not to the listeners and watchers either.
Mhm.
But I'll start with Luke Reynolds. Look, we mentioned Tyler Warren going in the first round of the NFL draft, and
Yeah.
it looks like Penn State has the guy to take over for him right away in 2025. Now, he's going to have competition. Khalil Dinkins, Andrew Rappelier coming back from the injury, and he was making some nice strides going into last season
It was.
as well. But Luke Reynolds, he was a former five-star in the 2024 class, came in as a glorified wide receiver, right? I think he told us last month that he threw maybe 3 blocks his senior year
Yeah.
in high school. He was a route runner through and through, but he put on some much needed weight. Uh, really got into it in terms of blocking. Learned a lot from Tyler Warren and Ty Howell, the tight ends coach, and we saw him progressively get more involved in the offense as the season went on last year, and he just projects as the next guy, to take over that, and be the next guy in that Penn State tight end pipeline. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's making some serious strides in the weight room. He's already been recognized by Ty Howell during these winter workout periods as a competitor of the day. And you don't want to put too much weight into those. I know we'll be talking about some of the other ones
Yeah.
as well in this podcast, but Luke Reynolds is just the breakout candidate of all breakout candidates, really, for this offense, and I think overall for this team going into the 2025 season. So keeping a close eye on what he's doing now in spring camp and over the summer.
Yeah, it's it's a real shame if you're Khalil Dinkins, to be honest, because I mean, I think my opinion on Khalil is the same one that a lot of people share. Like, that's a dang good football player who really does a lot for this team that tends to go unnoticed. I mean, he's one of the better blockers on the offensive side of the ball outside of the offensive line, of course. I mean, he might have been as good as Tyler Warren last year in terms of run blocking. And he's a solid pass catcher. I mean, he's come up how many times in his career on fourth downs in the red zone. I mean, he really is an impactful player, but he just simply doesn't have the ceiling that Luke Reynolds does. So I think he could once again, he's not going to be a forgotten man. Like, he's going to play a ton, but he's not going to be the guy, in my opinion, which, you want to be the guy if you have the opportunity. So kind of sucks for him, but if it means another deep playoff run and potentially a national championship, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't care. I wouldn't if that was the case. But I'm gonna throw out a wild card of a guy who may not necessarily impact the team a whole lot this fall, but a guy whose development and especially early impact is something that I'm really curious to see because in the spring practice, James Franklin has talked about how it's going to be different. We already know that they are going to kind of lighten the load on a lot of the veterans because of how long the 2024 season was, especially and the running back room. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, they were already doing that for those guys last year. Even during the season, practices were a lot lighter for them because they don't need to practice in the same way as young guys do. So through spring practice, Tyke Hayes out of Aliquippa is the guy that I really have an eye on right now because he also won one of those competitor of the day things. Grain of salt always. There are people who win more of those than anybody else and don't end up seeing the field. But it's still impressive to see a guy who just enrolled 2.5 months ago, be able to beat out a room full of veteran names. It's a good sign. He was probably one of the most undervalued prospects in the 2025 class. I mean, the things that he was doing at Aliquippa were unreal. I mean, he was just a really good football player. Penn State obviously very happy to have him. And this is an opportunity in spring. There's a battle for the number 3 running back position, even though they might only get 3 carries a game. It is a battle. I mean, there are going to be contributors behind Singleton and Allen. Right now, Corey Smith and Quentin Martin have the inside track, but a guy like Tyke, maybe he comes up and he plays in a few blowouts, but especially in spring practice when, you're looking at a blue-white game where nobody wants to risk injury or anything, he really could be a guy that, kind of pops and makes some people start talking about him. And I think he's going to pop as a strong kid too. Like he's built,
You got a little pop on your pop there, Max. I like it.
Yeah. It was for effect,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No, I like the pick. And you just look at that room. You mentioned Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, obviously the top dogs in that room going into the 2025 season. But you look behind them, and it is a battle, not just for this upcoming season, like who's going to get those, extra snaps, who's going to give them a breather in the fourth quarter against Villanova or get those reps, whatever. But you're also looking at 2026. And when, going into last season, we thought that Nick Singleton and Katron Allen might not be back for 2025. They definitely will be gone after this upcoming season.
Yeah.
For sure gone off to the NFL. And Penn State's going to need a new starting running back. And if you're able to get a jump start on things like Tyke Hayes has already and might continue to do in spring camp, while Jabri Wallace-Coleman from Imhotep, the other 2025 signee, doesn't come in until the spring or summer and won't be with the team, until May or June. Cam Wallace is, recovering from that serious injury that he had last year. Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, obviously, in the mix. And I would expect Quentin, especially, I think, to make an impact or at least make his presence felt.
Mm-hmm.
But Tyke Hayes has a real opportunity here. Another guy, and I'm going to stick with Western PA. By the way, when you asked me earlier for two guys who are standouts, like my two guys off the top of my head were Luke Reynolds and Cooper Cousins. And Cooper Cousins, it kind of falls in the Luke Reynolds category where it's super obvious. He was a weight room beast last winter. And would expect the same from him this winter as well, as he eyes that other starting guard spot with Sal Wormley gone. But a name I want to throw out kind of under the radar, and I wrote about him. We're recording this Thursday afternoon. I wrote about him for this morning. Is Peter Gonzalez, Central Catholic wide receiver who tore his ACL in high school and kind of had to prove himself to even get the green light to commit to Penn State, and ultimately did. Came back from that injury, performed really well, and camped well for in the high school circuit at Penn State. He suffers a knee injury in the preseason last year and misses his entire freshman year. We talked to him last month, and he was like, yeah, like he didn't really divulge into a timeline or how he's feeling and all that kind of stuff. But you don't want to put too much, stock in these competitor of the days. But the fact that he got one and it accompanied a picture of him doing a drill where he's bending, it's like, okay, like I guess the knee's good, right? And so I'm intrigued to see what kind of strides Peter Gonzalez has made, because we've talked a lot about Tysier Denmark in terms of a 2024 signee at wide receiver who can make an impact for this team this fall, with so much fluidity in that room and a room in need of a reset that we've talked about ad nauseum. But Peter Gonzalez, 6'2", former track star as well. Like, he's a burner when he's healthy. He could make an impact for this team. So really intrigued to see if Chuck Losey throws him a shout out this afternoon and to see how he's doing. But just another guy to keep an eye on, another Western PA guy to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a good sign to see him working out, right? I mean, that basically means he's cleared for the most part. It's good to see. He's an interesting one. There are plenty of names in that wide receiver room to keep an eye on. I'm going to throw just two more brief offensive names out there before we slide to the defensive side of the ball. The offensive line is similar to running back, where it is not up for grabs. Like, there are not spots right now, not even depth spots, because they've got a guy like JB Nelson coming back. They've got a TJ Shanahan transferring from Texas A&M. Like, there really aren't a lot of spots in the offensive line rotation. But the couple of freshman tackles they brought in last year kind of surprised me to see them getting some late run, especially Egan Boyer. Late in the season, he was getting on the field. Curious to see what he can do, with another full off season under his belt. And Garrett Sexton, the other one who, had some injury problems and was able to come back and believe he's healthy now. Those guys are interesting because, especially Boyer, he got on the field. Like, he got on the field in a crowded offensive line last year. So those are some key ones for me. Like I said, wanted to keep it brief, but Johnny, let's flip to the defensive side, where I would argue that there's more room for opportunity for young guys.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you kind of know who's the nailed on guys on defense. You have Denai Dennis Sutton at defensive end, but opposite him, is Zariah Fisher, who's a veteran who has dealt with some injuries over the course of his career. Is it, Smith Vilbert's gone, Jamel Lyons no longer with the team. Obviously, Abdul Carter off to the NFL. Amin Vanover, his NCAA waiver was denied, so he won't be back. And so it's like, okay, who behind them? Max Granville?
Yep.
That's a trendy name. Fellow Max, I know you're a big fan of him.
Oh yeah, I introduced myself to him for the first time a couple weeks ago, and everybody's coming up and shaking his hand, and I was like, well, I guess I'll shake your hand too. My name's Max. And he kind of like giggled and was like, yeah, nice name. It's like,
there you go.
It's just like, it's one of those where it's like not quite common enough that it's like surprising when you meet another Max,
Yeah. So, no, I mean, look, and Nice name and a very very nice player, very promising player on
Absolutely.
Penn State's defense. He reclassified and joined the team last August, so he didn't have any kind of offseason really,
Yep.
and still worked his way into a role. And so really intrigued to see what kind of offseason he could have
Mhm.
in the weight room in a spring camp, and see how much he develops and grows under Dion Barnes's leadership, and also working with a guy, opposite a guy like Denai Dennis Sutton, and see what he can learn from him. Um, I'll throw it to you, but I've got an under the radar name that I don't think you're going to bring up, so I'll save it.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've got one that, for those of you who have been following us pretty closely over, the end of the season and even into this off season, that might be a little not obvious, but on your radar. But I'm sticking with the defensive line. The interior is going to look a lot different because you lose Devon J. Thomas, you lose Keziah Izzard. It's going to look different. There are a lot of snaps out there. They lost Hakeem Beamon midway through the season. When we go watch them work out today, Zane Durant is going to steal all of the headlines. That dude is going to be all over your social media feed in about 2.5 hours because he's as strong as they come. He's absurd. But I think Xavier Gilliam is going to give him a run for his money. Xavier Gilliam's been a name that's been kind of in the mix there ever since they lost Beeman. And it was, will he maybe, get a little extra play time? He was on the field some, but didn't play a ton. We got the chance to talk to him as well with that group of second year players, and he is really smart. Like you can tell that he just gets it. Like every time you asked him a question, he thought about it before he gave you an answer. He played defensive end in high school, so getting his body up to the 300-pound range that he's in now took a little work. He said it wasn't really all that hard for him to put it on. Said he's never really struggled to put on weight, but what was harder was staying at a certain weight, and he's figured out how to do that, and he's where he wants to be moving forward. We've heard really good things about his work in the weight room. I really do think that he's gonna once Zane Durant leaves, he's in that same boat where he's gone next year. I think we're going to be talking about Xavier Gilliam a lot in a similar way because he was a little bit more of an undersized guy who's just very powerful. And I would put my money on the fact that when Chuck Losey brings out his list of players that have impressed him so far through winter workouts, I would bet that Gilliam will be on that list.
I'm with you 100%. And again, it's one of those situations, right, where someone's got to step up.
Yeah.
Someone's got to step up, and you lose, like you said, Devon J. Thomas. You lose Hakeem Beamon leaves the team because I is our like, who's that guy going to be?
Hmm.
And I think it could be Xavier Gilliam. So I'm with you there. The name that I didn't think you were going to say, and I don't think, and Max, it's not just you. I don't think this name is on really anyone's radar right
Sure.
now at all. And it's a guy that, shameless plug, I'm writing about for tomorrow morning, for Friday morning. So check it out
Hmm.
when it goes live on Penn Live. But Malachi Williams,
Yeah.
so Philly guy, Monsignor Bonner product, 4-star, ridiculously productive in high school. I mean, 28 tackles for loss as a senior. The quick twitch, the get off, the speed, super impressive. He gets to Penn State at 210 pounds. Not playing weight, not playing weight in the Big Ten at least. Obviously he had to gain some weight. He comes in last May, and from last May until when we talked to him a few weeks ago, put on 45 pounds
Hmm.
up to 255. So that's a big change. And you worry sometimes with defensive linemen specifically and edge rushers, really specifically, when they put on that kind of weight. It's like, are you going to lose the speed? Are you going to lose the quick twitch, the get off that made you the prospect that you were? And he said he's actually gotten faster. Like his 40 time has actually gotten better.
Yeah.
And so that's scary. That's a scary thought if you're an opposing offensive tackle. And there's opportunity now, right? Like last year, it was kind of perfect to bring him in the way he was as a bit of a project where you don't have any pressure to play on the no pressure to really get on the field when you have Abdul, Denai, Amin, ahead of you on the depth chart and a lot of other guys making hay as well. So I'm intrigued to see where he's at now. I'm intrigued to see and hear from Chuck Losey and from the staff as we get into spring camp. And I'm sure we'll be able to talk to Deion Barnes soon about the progress that Malachi Williams has made, because it is an intriguing spot. It's a very open spot.
It
You
is.
have Denai, you have Zariah Fisher, and I White is in the mix there as well. The transfer portal ad from Texas A&M. But just don't forget about Malachi Williams, because
Yeah.
there was a reason why Penn State was super high on him in the recruiting process, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a name for himself here in the coming month or two.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you and Bob already hit on the last time you guys recorded, but Smith Vilbert's out of that room now all of a sudden, and that was a significant number of snaps that he was going to get. So those have opened back up in a room that was already pretty open. So we've talked a ton about defensive line. There are other defensive positions that have time up for grabs. I do want to say one more defensive lineman that I don't know a lot about personally, and I don't think anybody really knows a lot about, is Owen Wafel coming in from Michigan. I think he's more of a project piece, which is why I'm curious to see if we hear about him, whether it's today with Losey or throughout spring, because he didn't play at all in his freshman year at Michigan. But the staff goes and gets him for a reason. I'm curious to see where he's at. If it's another year or two before he's ready to play, fine, but I'm just curious to hear about him maybe a little bit. He is on campus now. To move on, I
Really,
do
really
want.
quick, really quick. One
Yeah.
thing to add on Owen Wafel. His brother Luke is a very, very high profile recruit
Yes.
in the 2026 class. I think On3 has him ranked as high as 19 overall.
Yeah, that's the number.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that could help too. If
Yeah.
Owen Wafel, not only is he on campus, but if he's enjoying his time, if he's making strides, if James Franklin is able to speak positively of him,
Mhm.
perhaps that helps Penn State down the road in recruiting. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, I mean that's definitely part of this. You can't forget about that with any Owen Wafel discussion. And I think every time that I've written about Wafel, I've mentioned Luke because it's just it's part of it. But we'll see where that goes. But there will come a day here very soon, and it'll probably happen during spring practice as we start to run out of things to say. But we need to preview the freshman class a little bit in total, because right now we just don't know a ton about those guys, and we'll learn more from spring ball as to who could see the field and who can't, whatever. But I do think that one of the guys I'm most intrigued to see this spring is Darius Dixon coming over from Mater Dei. He was, basically the number one recruit in Penn State's recruiting class by almost every service, every ranking. He's a cornerback who's a bigger body, and he looks. We've seen him a couple times because he is on campus already. He looks ready. He's a big body. He looks good. And cornerback, whether it's playing on the defense or it's contributing on special teams, is a position as easy as any to be able to actually get in as a freshman and burn that red shirt. I mean, look at Dejon Lane last year. He's going to be an interesting one to see him continue to develop just because of his size. I mean, he is an abnormally large safety. Dejon is. So Darius Dixon's one. I mean, really, I think this entire freshman defensive back group is interesting. I think that Penn State put together a really good group in this recruiting class. And, once they get a hold of Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter's coaching, who knows from there, because those two guys are as good as it gets. But Dixon is one that I really want to watch throughout this spring.
On the flip side, maybe we'll get some Darius Dixon against Matthew Alton.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. That'd be
It
cool
would
to
be.
watch because you talk about possible difference makers, on the offensive side of the ball and at wide receiver. It is such a fluid group, right? It's going to be whoever steps up and whoever performs and whoever earns the reps and the snaps and the targets from Drew Aller, because Harrison Wallace gone, Amari Evans gone, Julian Fleming more of a blocker but gone.
Mhm.
So you have Devontae Ross coming in from Troy, Kyron Hudson coming in from USC. Wouldn't be surprised if they go. Honestly, would be surprised if they don't get another guy in the spring portal window if there's a target or two out there. That's going to be a little iffy, but they're going to be hunting still.
Yeah, let's touch on that a little bit. I'm glad you brought it up. James Franklin was very vague, but he seemed to say that was the case when he was asked about, the status of the wide receiver room. I believe that was the day that Jim Knowles was introduced way back then.
That was when we talked to the freshman. So there was
Okay.
it was a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. The timelines are all blurry. But yeah, Franklin was like, we're going to evaluate our options in the spring portal too. And then we talked to Pat Kraft 2 weeks later, and Penn State athletic director comes out and flatly says, we need a wide receiver. Everybody knows it. And like, knowing a little bit about how James Franklin operates, I feel like he probably wasn't super thrilled to have Pat come out and say that as flatly as he did. But when your athletic director is out there talking about it, and granted, Kraft is as involved as any athletic director in the country, but like it's a real big need, and Penn State's cognizant of it. Fans and media, us all alike, we keep hammering it, but like they're aware. They're aware, and they're doing what they can to fix it. It just hasn't happened yet. So the spring portal, definitely keep an eye out. But you're right to go off of that tangent and come back to where we were. Matt Outen's an interesting one. I think all three of the receivers who are on campus right now are worth watching. Outen's probably the most likely to contribute right away. Lyric Samuel's got some serious work to do in building onto his frame. I mean, he's just too small right now. You see him in action on the field or anything. He's just too small right now. But that'll change. He's got time. And Kobe Howard, he has been kind of injury riddled throughout high school. There is some serious playmaking ability in that player. But he's got to stay healthy and adapt to this level. But I think Outen's the one who's most ready to do it right away.
Yeah, you called it a tangent. That's where I was going. So I wouldn't disagree. You're not a tangent. You're good, man. Because that's where I was going to go. I was going to bring up the freshman,
Yeah.
but also just in the back of your mind, Penn State fans, as we progress through this thing, winter workouts and into spring ball upcoming in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Know that there's probably another reinforcement or two on the way because of how outward and how vocal Pat Kraft was. And you said that James Franklin might not have liked it, but if that's a trade-off, being like, all right, I'm gonna say like we need a wide receiver, but I'm also gonna give you $3 million a year for Jim Knowles. I think the trade-off is fair.
Yeah.
And fine. But yeah, Penn State, I would not say that they're done at all in the transfer portal, but it's going to be a big spring camp for these wide receivers to try to prove to James Franklin and Marcus Hagans, and most importantly, prove to Drew Aller that the need to go out there and add another guy or two. Hey, you don't feel like you need to do that. Don't feel compelled. Like, I'm the guy. I can step up. I can provide what hadn't been provided over the last really 2 years. Just a go-to guy who will make a play for you every single time. That has been missing, and those are hard to come by, right? Like, is Devontae Ross going to be that? Is Kyron Hudson going to be that? We don't know. But these younger guys, the freshmen now, the Tysier Denmarks of the world, like the next month and a half is huge for them. Is huge, and certainly cannot be overlooked at all.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a topic in just about every podcast that gets put out between today and the end of the spring transfer window, because it's just that's the difference. I mean, it really is. This Penn State team is solid from top to bottom, and if there's a question mark still, it's wide receiver, and it's going to continue to be until they prove us otherwise. And I think they know that too. Like, Marcus Hagans isn't sitting there in the locker room after an Orange Bowl loss to Notre Dame, where his group does not have a catch, and thinking, oh yeah, it's fine. These guys are still. No, he knows. They all know. Like, yeah, it's going to continue to be a topic of conversation. I think we're heading toward wrapping up here, we'll hit a little bit on the NFL Combine, Johnny, which, I was out there, the Combine, and then, of course, the implications on the draft. We've got a little bit of a group here in front of us for the live audience. For those of you watching later on YouTube or listening on Spotify, we appreciate you. If anybody has questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the chat. We'll try and get to them. But let's talk a little bit about NFL drafts. Johnny, I came away from the Combine really impressed with Jalen Reed, Kobe King, Kevin Winston Jr., Abdul Carter, Tyler Warren, all of those guys. And yeah, they had a really good week. Only one guy did full workouts, Jalen Reed, but he did really well in them. He got some praise from NFL.com for being on the all combine defensive team. What that means, it's up for debate, because there's a guy like South Carolina's Nick Amenwari who had probably the best combine in history and wasn't on the list, but that's because he didn't do the on-field drills like the safety drills, and Jalen Reed did. So, even to be in consideration with that group is good. And Kobe did some linebacker drills, but he didn't run. But, especially Jalen Reed and Kevin Winston, I thought those were the two guys that I was most interested in hearing from and talking to, learning a little bit about their draft stock, because their situations. Those of you who follow Penn State closely understand, like, Kevin Winston was going to be a first rounder before he got hurt. Like, he was that good, and especially his physical, his body is that good. It's NFL ready. Jalen Reed had first round production. Like, he was one of the best defensive backs in college football last year. We weren't necessarily sure if the NFL saw him that way. He's 6'1", 211, not necessarily the fastest guy out there. He ran a good 40 though, for himself. And teams like him on day two. Like, he could go between the second and fourth round. And for Winston, like, it's pretty hard and fast. He's a second rounder, is what we've heard from them. We've heard from anybody. And so I thought those guys were really interesting. I thought that was good news for them. I think it's deserving for them, for us who, have covered Penn State closely and know these guys a little bit more than, some of the national people who might make mock drafts. I think it's good for them. I think it's deserved. And that was what I walked away with most intrigued from the Combine.
Max, Penn State's going to have two first rounders in Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren. Like you mentioned, Jalen Reed, who has been a podcast favorite. I know Bob loves the guy. I mean, obviously we appreciated what he did on the field, but he's a Bob Flounder's favorite. We talked about him a lot on Monday's podcast. We talked about KJ, talked about Kobe. Penn State's not going to have a wide receiver drafted in this draft.
Nope.
Technically, maybe. Kind of.
Potentially.
And so that's what I want to ask you about, because me and Bob, we talked a lot about the 5 Penn State guys there. But the one former Penn State guy, the wide receiver, you got to talk to him, Keandre Lambert-Smith.
Yeah.
What were your takeaways from talking to Keandre? Because, look, he had some nice production at Penn State, but also really disappeared down the stretch in the 2023 season. Entered the portal, went to Auburn, put up some seriously good numbers for a moderate to bad Auburn team. But I'm curious, what were your takeaways from talking to Keandre, really for the first time since he was in a Penn State uniform?
Yeah, and hey, he might have had the play of Auburn's season, with that overtime catch in the end zone. He had a productive year. He almost touched 1,000 yards. I think he had 8 touchdowns, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he was. I mean, obviously, we knew Keandre from when he was here. Loose cannon might be a little more, not quite the right word, but he's got a big personality. Always did. Showed it on the field too. But I was impressed with him talking at the Combine that, like, he seemed to have matured a little bit. And obviously, there's a piece of that where NFL agents are drilling these guys before they head to the Combine. Like, they know that it's a job interview. They know that it's like the biggest thing for them right now and for their draft stock. Obviously, they're going to have these guys buttoned up in their interviews and everything. But Keandre really seemed mature. He was handling he was handling everything well. Like every question he got about transferring from Penn State, he was like, yeah, I made lifelong relationships there, but sometimes good things end. Like, and it was kind of obvious in the way he talked, but he didn't come out and immediately say it. But it was obvious there were clashes in philosophy, and he just didn't really feel like it was a good fit for him anymore. And as we know, Penn State probably felt the same way. So I think it was a mutual breakup that worked well for both sides because look, Keandre, he got his confidence back. Is basically what he said being at Auburn. And like for a guy who is as vocal and energetic as he is, that's important for his game because that was always a thing with Keandre. Talking to James Franklin when he was in his third year, it was like, yeah, it's the mental battle with him. We know how talented he is, but one bad thing can throw him off. And James Franklin was really open and honest about that. And I think Keandre saying, yeah, going to Auburn and having a big year gave me my confidence back. Like, I think this guy's draftable. He was kind of in the middle of the pack in his combine testing, in pretty much all the uh, athleticism drills. He ran a really good 40. I think it was 4.37. So straight line speed. That's good news for him, especially a guy who might be able to come out of either the slot or the outside spots, depending on his skill set, how NFL teams see him. But I was impressed with Keandre. I thought it was good to hear from him again. Really the first time since he transferred. It was just mysterious disappearance when he was practicing in spring ball and then just didn't play in the blue white game. I mean, he knew he was transferring. It was obvious, but yeah, I think everything really worked out well for him. I think he handled everything that came his way well, and I'm curious to see what happens for him in April.
He said he was rooting for Penn State down the stretch.
Right.
I don't know if I believe that.
That's the thing. That's why I kind of started it with saying he seemed like he matured and was handling everything really well because he was asked some stuff that was like very clearly intended to try and get a soundbite out of him, and he didn't go for it. And that's good for Keandre because I'm not sure that Keandre of old would have been able to deflect those kinds of things. And
I hate those questions.
yeah,
It bothers me to no end. Penn
right.
Live readers and listeners know that me, Max, and Bob will not ask questions that try to elicit like a soundbitey response. That's not what we're here to do. There are people out there who do it though.
Right, and the combine is a breeding ground for that stuff just because of the setup.
So annoying.
But that's why I say I think he matured a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I believe him when he says he was rooting for Penn State. I do believe him when he says he was texting people back at Penn State who he was still friends with. Like I think he was probably rooting for his guys to do well. I'm not sure he was necessarily rooting for Penn State as a whole. He did say that he's talked to Marcus Hagans here and there. Texting. They're both from Virginia. Hagans coached him for his final year at Penn State. Like the bridges might have been burned, but not all of them. Is kind of where I'm heading with that.
Sure.
But you cover a guy for how many years? You hope for him to have success, and Keandre, I think he's draftable. I'm curious. I think he could stick. He's always had the skill set, and he went off and had a good, productive year. So I was pretty impressed with him at the combine overall. He definitely looked a little different than he did while he was at Penn State, and I think that was in a good way.
Yeah, no, I'm intrigued to see. I feel like I've said intrigued a lot this podcast, but I am intrigued.
This is the time of the year for intrigue, Johnny. That's what spring ball's for.
I am intrigued by a lot of things, especially with this Penn State team. Where they go, not where they go necessarily, but where some of these pieces go and how they progress. So we talked about a lot of them, the young guys, the potential spring standouts. Like, this is the time to do it because some of these 2025 signees who are going to be coming in May, any more portal additions that are going to be coming in, like they're going to be factoring in training camp in August and then ultimately the fall. But this is a this is a real opportunity for some of these players to stand out to the coaches,
Yeah.
stand out to the strength and conditioning staff now, stand out to your position coaches and obviously James Franklin and the coordinators in the spring. But very intrigued, Max. Very intrigued by what's percolating within this Penn State program right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just also going to put it out there. I think Abdul Carter is going number one. Like, like,
Okay,
like. All
go
right.
ahead.
If I'm the Titans brass, you messed up horribly at the quarterback spot once already. It's a new GM. This quarterback draft is so up in the air anyway. You really can't afford to get it wrong again because that sets your franchise back another 3 years. Abdul is pretty much a surefire thing on the defensive side of the ball, assuming he stays healthy. If you're not confident in those quarterbacks, you either take him at 1 or you trade back and you try and get him at 3 or 4, which I think is very possible. The other thing I will say is if the Titans go quarterback, I think he's going to the Patriots at 4.
Yep.
That's my. I don't think he's falling out of the top 5. And I'll let you speak on it, Johnny. But I'm just going to quickly say Tyler Warren definitely not getting out of the top 15. People are in love with him at the NFL level. I've seen the Saints at 9. I think the Dolphins are at 13. That's they're not in desperate need of a tight end, but Mike McDaniel would be pretty fun with Tyler Warren. And Bengals, Colts, I think those teams are all in there. I don't think he's getting out of the top 15. I think Penn State's going to have 2 top 15, potentially 2 top 10 picks, in which if they do get 2 top 10, that'd be the first time since LeVar and Courtney Brown. So this is a big draft for Penn State, even though they only got 5 guys at the combine.
Yep. No, I agree. I like the Colts for Tyler Warren and my buddy from the Collegian from back in my Penn State student newspaper days. He's a big Colts fan, and
Okay.
he's hoping that Tyler Warren is there at 14, I believe.
Yeah.
They're at, but I think Abdul is the best player in the draft, best prospect in the draft. I don't think he's going to go number 1.
That's fair.
I think like right now, the way I kind of see it with Stafford staying in LA, and I know he was flirting with the whole like, oh, trade me and get a bigger contract kind of thing.
Yeah.
Staying in LA, the Giants need a quarterback.
They do.
I think they're going to move up from 3 to 1 and take Cam Ward. The Browns, and then it's like, if you're the Browns at 2, you've got all your options ahead of you. You need a quarterback desperately. I mean, the Titans need a quarterback too. But if I'm the Titans, I'm trading out of 1 to 3 and then guaranteeing myself, either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter.
That's what I do.
They have so many needs that like I'm cool with whichever guy falls to me there.
The Titans are in rough shape. Yeah.
I mean, all the teams within the top, 4 or 5, like at least the Patriots at 4. If I'm a Penn State fan, and I know like I'm a Steelers fan or an Eagles fan, like, Abdul Carter not going to land with either of those 2 teams.
No.
Or if you're a Penn State fan who's a Ravens fan, not going to like.
Yeah.
If I'm just hoping for the best scenario for Abdul Carter to thrive, man, keep him out of Cleveland, keep him away from the Giants, and put him in New England with Mike Vrabel as the head coach. They've got a young, exciting quarterback, I think, in Drake May. Some cap room to play with, so they'll be aggressive in free agency. Could be a playoff team within the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Put Abdul Carter with them and watch him work, watch him learn and grow in New England. That's like my hope for just like knowing Abdul and like hoping for the best for him in his future.
Yep.
Land from New England. Comparatively speaking, like to these other teams that are out there.
Yes. Possibly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Titans are an interesting one because while they do have so many needs, like their new GM comes from the Chiefs and like maybe they can throw something together soon. But I think far and away the Patriots are the best landing spot. And, they'll be interested. They'll be interested for sure. I mean, if Abdul falls to 4, it's like a done deal. Like, they're not going to use that whole 7.5 minutes or whatever they get on the clock. Like it's that card is going in right away because it'll be a shock if he even falls to 4. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us here, Johnny. on this live edition of the Blue White Breakdown. I think you teased it in the last podcast, but we're getting a regimented schedule finally. We're doing Monday mornings for the off season. Thursday afternoons, come eat your lunch with us at noon. Tell your friends, leave us some comments, come hang out. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to talk about things that don't have anything to do with football pretty often in the summer. Just be ready for it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Johnny and I are going to take the lead most often on these Thursdays. Bob's your man on Mondays, and the two of us will rotate between with him. I will be gone for the next few weeks. This is your first Thursday with me and your last for a little while, but they'll be back. Don't worry. Don't cry. I know you want to. But yeah, Johnny, this is a fun one. Always good to talk about the intrigue of spring football practice. And there's going to be a lot more of this coming. So stay tuned.
Enjoy Tokyo, man.
I will. I mean, if anybody's ever taken 2 seconds to look at what's behind me in the podcast section, very excited. Heading to Japan for a couple weeks, going to see the Cubs play. It's going to be incredible. So, but enjoy.
If you're in any like stores there and there's like a plush like Big Man Blastoise, please.
For you.
Yeah,
I got you. Don't worry, Johnny. Don't worry. Big Man Blastoise will be. We'll get. Can we edit in the Big Man Blastoise song right at the end of this?
We'll talk to our editors about it.
Yeah. Awesome. Good to see you, Johnny. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week.